Let's see what happens when nobody is watching. At a Burlington cafe, Catherine Whitmore left her leather clutch behind. Her phone pressed to her ear, Vincent Mallory's voice barked, "Abort emergency." She just grabbed her coffee and walked right out. 3 tables away sat Daniel Reeve, 41, flannel sleeves rolled. His hands scarred from fixing a generator. He silently watched that forgotten clutch sitting there. He picked it up, 40,000 in cash, an ID, and a slip he left unread. Catching her at the curb, he returned it, walking away before she could even ask his name. She stood there absolutely frozen, quietly watching him disappear. By 11 that morning, Catherine was back inside the Whitmore Foundation Tower on Main Street. Placing the clutch on her desk, she checked again. 40,000 counted twice, not one bill missing. Her screen showed 3 missed calls from Mallory. She deliberately ignored every single one of them. That cash was withdrawn hours earlier through a last-minute vendor payment requisition her CFO had quietly pushed through. Urgent, he had called it, off-cycle. She hadn't questioned it at the time. Now she tried picturing the stranger's honest face. Blue flannel, steady eyes, and the humble way he turned away on the sidewalk, like he didn't even need a thank you. That memory was all she had. Catherine sat on the board of the Burlington Business Improvement District. Their local security camera network covered every single block of Church Street. Behind locked doors, she pulled up the 942 security footage entirely alone. There he sat at a corner table, quietly drinking black coffee. He stood up when she left, picked up the clutch, and followed her right to the door. Then he returned, sat down, finished his coffee, and carried the empty cup to the tray. That quiet detail completely held her. This is where you and I see true character. He returned 40 grand, then calmly finished his coffee. She asked Eleanor Pace to run the license plates on the dust-gray Ford pickup that pulled away 3 minutes later. Eleanor was the senior accountant. She had been with the family for 22 years. She hesitated for half a second before handing over the private home address. Catherine caught the hesitation but chose not to press it. The house sat on Burlington's south edge, where streets faded into chain-link fences and birch trees. Catherine parked across the street. The man wasn't even in his own front yard. He was kneeling by a neighbor's fence, replacing a rotted post, quietly pounding gravel into the dirt with a 2x4. A young girl sat on the porch of the very house she had come to find. 9, maybe 10 years old, brown hair held back with a plastic clip. A hardback book lay open across her knees, a worn stuffed rabbit sitting beside her. Looking up, he recognized her. His expression immediately closed off. Catherine stepped out, crossing the road slowly. She held a plain white envelope in her hand. Unmarked and unsealed, she held it out right at the edge of the property line. For returning the wallet, she offered $500. It isn't a reward, it's just a thank you. He stopped working the gravel, set the 2x4 down, stood up, and wiped his dirty hands on his jeans. "It isn't that I don't need it," he said, his voice sounding much lower than she remembered. "I just don't want it like this." Then he calmly turned back to the post. The little girl on the porch closed her book over a single finger. "Dad," she called out. "Who's the lady?" Without looking up, he replied, "Someone passing through." We watched Catherine stand there, the envelope still tight in her hand. She slipped it into her coat, walked to her car, and sat in the quiet driver's seat for a long time before finally starting the engine. A guy who secretly fixed a neighbor's fence for free. A man refusing $500 after secretly returning $40,000. The math of his hidden integrity didn't add up, and you and I know Catherine simply couldn't let it go. The following evening, after a dull board call she scarcely recalled joining, she cruised those south side streets again, moving slowly in the dark, searching for something unnameable. She spotted his Ford parked by the Burlington Community Free Clinic over on Pine Street. An old flat-roofed clinic given away decades prior, the founding doctor's name still painted out front. She parked 2 blocks down, then trekked back through the freezing chill. The damp sidewalk glistened from a quick burst of snow that had already melted. The clinic featured a side window into a treatment room, its blinds pulled 3/4 shut. Through that bottom 4 inches of glass, she spied a bright fluorescent ceiling panel, the edge of a medical table, and the lower torsos of 2 different men. One guy wore green scrubs, the other sported flannel. A teen rested on the table. Catherine couldn't see the kid's face, only his chest rising in quick, shallow breaths. The bottom of his shirt was soaked in dark blood from a nasty stab wound. Daniel Reeve was secretly suturing it. She couldn't tear her eyes away from his steady, gloved hands. That needle pierced and exited at the exact same depth every time, perfectly spaced out. He pulled the thread through with a gentle tug, using zero wasted effort. The actual clinic doctor just stood nearby with crossed arms, simply watching him work. Not helping, just studying a master in secret. Catherine slipped away before they noticed her. She drove straight home, sitting at her kitchen island with her laptop open. Coat still on, she typed Daniel Reeve, Vermont. Not a single search result made sense. Just an old insurance broker in Rutland, and some track coach down in Bennington. Not one handyman in Burlington. She searched Daniel Reeve, MD. The fourth link revealed an archived press release from Walter Reed Military Medical Center. The header photo displayed a serious man wearing crisp military dress blues. Younger jaw, slightly sharper but possessing the exact same eyes. The text read, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Reeve, Navy Medical Corps, earns the Distinguished Service Medal for Combat Surgical Service. It was dated 2015. Catherine sat frozen, one hand resting on her trackpad, the other covering her mouth. She didn't move. You and I can see it now. The guy who returned her 40 grand wasn't some random stranger. He used to be a hero but had quietly chosen a life in the shadows. She gently shut her laptop, refusing to dig any deeper. Some secret doors simply weren't hers to open uninvited. The very next morning brought the monthly Charity Foundation board meeting. Catherine took her usual spot at the massive walnut table, the bright lake shimmering through the glass behind her. Benson Mallory sat in his usual chair to her right, his spot for 9 straight years. He navigated the meeting's agenda with the slick rhythm of a man doing this since she was in college. Reaching item 7, he proposed a $2.3 million payout to Cascade Mountain Infrastructure Consulting. Eleanor's pen hovered anxiously above the approval sheet. Her hand began to tremble, but she secretly signed it anyway. Catherine caught Eleanor's hidden panic, then she stared down Mallory. I want to see the full contract before disbursement, she demanded quietly. The room fell silent like only old money rooms do. Let's see her true character now, Mallory just smiled. You and I know to watch the eyes. His stayed completely dead. Of course, Catherine, he promised. He smoothly shifted to item 8. Catherine ignored her meeting notes after that, looking deeper at things unseen. 3 days later, Catherine quietly returned to that modest South End home in the fading blue sunset light. Stripping the wealthy armor, she left her corporate jacket behind. She wore a simple wool sweater. She brought no reward envelope to hide behind this time. Unseen by the world, Daniel was on the porch, carefully sanding a broken wooden step. Nora's worn bicycle lay sideways in the grass. The rusted chain was completely off. The front tire was flat. He looked up from his quiet labor without standing. Mr. Reeve, she said. I need to ask you something professional with absolutely no reward. He set the rough sandpaper down. She explained her foundation's rural health plan, pushing mobile primary care into the struggling Northeast Kingdom region. They needed a medical consultant who understood tough field conditions, harsh travel, and zero resources. A doctor tested by gritty reality, not sitting safely in a luxury hospital tower, she explained. He absorbed the words, staying completely silent for a long moment. I don't practice medicine anymore, he muttered. I know, Catherine replied. I saw you volunteering at the free clinic, she whispered. His posture immediately shifted into guarded stillness. Not angry, just deeply braced. Personal reasons, he said. She nodded, never pressing further. Nora walked down the wooden porch steps, her heavy school backpack still firmly strapped on. Spotting Catherine, she froze in place. Hi, Catherine offered. Hi, the young girl studied her. My tire's flat, I clearly see that. Daniel quietly walked over and knelt beside the damaged bike. 2 strong thumbs stripped the tire right off the rim, exposing the hidden puncture in 3 seconds. He patched it using a simple kit his daughter scrambled to grab from the kitchen drawer. The movements mirrored his old suture work, pure, quiet economy, with absolutely zero wasted thought. Nora silently watched Catherine closely observe her father. Dad, the little girl asked, can't you just stay for dinner? Daniel didn't answer her right away. He calmly smoothed the rubber patch, pumped the tire, tested the air pressure, then gave one quiet nod. The modest kitchen smelled warmly of fresh garlic and butter. The room was bathed in warm amber light from an old ceiling fixture untouched since the 80s. Spaghetti, a plain green salad, and a simple water jug resting on the table. Nora chattered freely while Catherine quietly listened. My mom used to draw maps, Nora said, twirling her pasta noodles, not real ones, made up. Like a magical country named Borrowwood with 3 rivers, and a city where everyone lived inside book towers. That sounds absolutely wonderful, Catherine said. She knew the names of all the winter stars, all of them. She used to teach me all about Orion's belt and what the ancient people in Egypt called it. Daniel silently set his fork down, then simply picked it up again. Let's look closer. His knuckles turned bone white around the handle. That wedding ring remained firmly on. Catherine accidentally noticed the hidden tragedy. What exactly happened to her? Catherine asked gently. She got sick, Nora stated plainly, 2 years ago now, almost 3. She said it exactly like children do when they've lived inside a painful truth long enough to carry it. Daniel's eyes stayed firmly locked on his plate. After eating, Nora suddenly hugged Catherine unprompted at the door. The raw embrace was incredibly quick and complete. Then the girl rushed upstairs to brush her teeth. Daniel quietly walked Catherine to her car. Thank you, she finally said. He stared out at the shadowed yard, then met her eyes. She doesn't usually do that. I know. True to form, he politely held the car door open, then gently closed it. We both know why she didn't start the engine immediately. Hands gripping the steering wheel, she just stared at that warm, glowing kitchen window until the father's light finally flicked off. True character hides. Catherine spent 2 days digging deep into the Foundation's private accounts. She pressed Eleanor for 18 months of Cascade Mountain consulting billing records. Eleanor promised the files by Thursday. Thursday arrived with absolutely nothing. Then she bought time until Friday. Friday came and went too. Catherine stepped into Eleanor's office, closing the door firmly. Eleanor. The older woman slowly lowered her glasses. Avoiding eye contact entirely, she warned, Catherine, please don't dig there. That was her only warning before turning back to her screen. Notice her hands, pressed flat against the desk just to hide the nervous trembling. Catherine studied her quietly, didn't push it, and left. After work, she steered her car south. That route to the south end was familiar now. Daniel sat on his porch holding a mug. His daughter's room was dark. The dim yellow porch bulb barely pushed the shadows away from the yard. Catherine took the seat across from him without waiting for any kind of invitation. She placed her question between them like a heavy, dangerous object in the dark. If a charity pulls $40,000 in cash for a sudden vendor payment, she asked, what would you think? Let's pause here. Daniel stayed perfectly silent while a heavy truck rumbled by one street over. A nearby dog barked twice, then went totally quiet. Massive cash payouts from a nonprofit, he finally answered, always boil down to 3 things. Bribery, hush money, or laundering. He delivered the ugly truth like a doctor reading a fatal chart, completely flat. Zero emotion. Look at exactly who signed that paperwork, he added. That is where the rot starts. She studied his shadowed face. The dim bulb highlighted his jawline. How do you know all of that exactly? He never met her eyes. I knew a guy once who learned that lesson the hard way. He kept the rest hidden. She respected his secrets and didn't push. They sat in heavy silence for what felt like hours, but was only 4 minutes. When she finally got up, he stood too, but he didn't escort her to the car. He just stayed on those steps, hands buried deep in his pockets, watching her fade into the dark. She drove straight back to the corporate tower, swiping her card at the hidden side door. The massive lobby was pitch black, except for the single glowing security desk. The night guard gave a silent nod. He'd known her true character since she was 16. Alone in her office, she yanked that exact requisition slip from the locked financial files. $40,000. Off-cycle payment, the beneficiary line completely blacked out. And there in the bottom corner, the signature, Vincent K. Mallory. She sat frozen in the pale glow of the monitor, letting the terrible truth wash over her. Outside, the dark lake sat like a black plate. A lone barge drifted somewhere far north. Quietly, she grabbed her phone. Her entire life, whenever a crisis hit, her first instinct was calling the corporate family lawyer. But tonight she ignored his name. She scrolled right past Eleanor's contact. She even skipped her mother. Instead, she dialed a number saved without a last name. 2 rings, he answered. Daniel, she whispered, I need you to tell me my next move. The line went quiet. He wasn't hesitating, he was calculating the risk. Don't put anything in writing, he ordered. Don't tell Eleanor, and don't sleep at home tonight. Listen to that warning. She closed her eyes. All right. The next morning at 9, Catherine marched right into Mallory's office. This was her grandfather's old space. Even the carpet held decades of hidden family secrets. She sat across from him, right where he'd been subtly steering her for 2 days. Hidden control. He poured her coffee without even asking first. Catherine, he lied, leaning back, I have been worried about you. She held the mug, secretly refusing to drink. You have been under tremendous strain, he pressed on. Your father hid his massive burdens in private. I watched him do it. I watched it kill him. I refuse to watch that happen to you. Take a few weeks away, Vincent said smoothly. Bermuda, Aspen. Escape the spreadsheets. Let me quietly handle your daily routine items. We can revisit larger questions once you're fully rested. His voice stayed perfectly warm. A mask of pure warmth, unblinking eyes, she silently put the cup down, still refusing a sip. I will think about it, she replied. She walked out, finally dropping her guard inside the empty elevator. Now follow me to Daniel at the Burlington City Hall Annex. He was working completely unnoticed, fixing a generator on the 2nd floor. A lonely routine task, panel cracked open, sharp ozone filling up his lungs. Just above him, a window sat slightly open to vent the dusty room. Through that gap, a man's voice drifted in from the adjacent private office. Lazy, smooth, secretly familiar, Holcomb, the unseen voice was casually saying into a phone. Vincent here. Listen closely, Catherine is showing dangerous signs. Paranoia, quietly digging into private documents she absolutely shouldn't chase. I want a wellness check kept ready if it ever comes down to that. She controls hidden assets that, if mishandled, would prove extremely concerning. Here is where you and I see his true colors. Screwdriver frozen, he stayed motionless, ignoring the window. He silently counted to 5, relying on old hidden habits from classified debriefings where any reaction could betray everything. Yes, Catherine Whitmore, your dear old friend, the two-faced voice confirmed. Operating purely in the shadows, Daniel tightened the final screw. Slow, precise movements, he packed his tools into the canvas bag one by one. He quietly vanished down the empty back stairs. He refused to make calls in public. He drove home. Nora was having a rough night. At 10, she shuffled into the dark kitchen wearing green pajamas, tightly gripping Mr. Biscuit's floppy ear. I dreamed our door was wide open and you were entirely gone. He gently scooped her up, even though she was getting much too heavy. He carried her upstairs, sitting softly on the very edge of her mattress. Dad, she whispered privately, are you sad sometimes? Yes, like all the time? Sometimes more than others. She stayed perfectly quiet. Is Catherine ever coming back for dinner? He held his tongue. Once she finally drifted off, he slipped back downstairs alone. He stood entirely alone at the counter for 60 seconds. Then he grabbed the phone and called. She picked up on the 2nd ring. You are being watched, he warned. How do you know? He stared out the pitch-black window. Because I used to be exactly who they send to secretly watch other people. Operating in absolute secret, Eleanor arranged a meeting at a Winooski cafe. Tucked past the bridge, completely hidden from where anyone at the corporate foundation would ever eat. A diner with green vinyl booths and a scuffed counter surviving since the 1970s. Catherine arrived unseen. Eleanor hurried inside, keeping her heavy winter coat tightly buttoned. Remaining guarded, she never took it off. She slid a small brass key across. A hidden safe deposit box. Stay with me here, I must speak fast, Eleanor whispered. No questions until I finish. And right there, Catherine quietly claimed the hidden key. Vincent has been secretly laundering money through Cascade Mountain Consulting for 3 years, Eleanor confessed. Behind closed doors, it wasn't an infrastructure firm, pure pass-through. The real recipients were witnesses in his nephew's federal embezzlement trial. He paid them off to vanish, and he used us to do it. Catherine froze. We see true character in these quiet moments. My son noticed first, Eleanor continued. Marcus was an analyst here. He brought the secret to me in 2023. I told him to take it straight to the feds. Her voice broke just once. She went on. 6 weeks later, he was biking on Riverside Avenue. A brown SUV shoved him into a guardrail and just kept driving. He lived, both legs, his spleen, Police said they couldn't prove intent. He's in protective custody. Has been for 14 months. The Bureau hid him after the second attack. Her eyes welled up, holding steady. I have copies of everything. Wire transfers, off-book ledgers, a secret audio file. They're locked in a safe deposit box at Montpelier Savings over on State Street. She gestured at the key. That's it, but I can't walk into that bank. If Vincent's watchers spot me, my son is dead, Catherine. He's all I've got. Catherine gripped the key. In the shadows, the metal felt warm from Eleanor's grip. You need a ghost, Eleanor whispered. Someone completely off the books and out of sight. No vendor lists, 0 board minutes, no emails. Catherine knew exactly who. She drove south under the radar. Daniel sat on his porch when she arrived. He was already waiting, even though she hadn't told him she was coming. She climbed the steps, quietly placing the key on the tiny table between them. She didn't say a word. He just stared at that key for a long time. If I do this, he muttered, I can't go back to being invisible, not after. Not really, I know. Nora loses her cover too, I know, she murmured softly. Watch him closely here. He picked up the key, turning it slowly between his fingers. I'm not going to ask you to do this, she said. He finally met her eyes. You aren't asking, I'm hearing it. He squeezed the key in his fist, silently deciding. I'll go, he decided. For this town, for Nora, he held her gaze, and for you. What he left unspoken hung in the air. The sentence ended at you, lingering quietly. Catherine collapsed into the chair across from him, her knees giving out in private. He went inside. From out there, she heard his footsteps, then a muffled, loving goodnight in his daughter's room. He returned wearing a clean shirt and a rugged canvas jacket. We leave at 4, he told her, before the bank's morning shift changes over. He deliberately clicked off the porch light himself. That tense drive to Montpelier took an hour and 12 minutes. They barely spoke. The dark pre-dawn road was completely deserted, minus one salt truck passing near Waterbury. Montpelier Savings opened right at 8. Daniel walked in first. Catherine hid in the truck. Inside, the brass key perfectly fit the box. The flash drive inside was the size of a deck of cards. It was taped to paper, reading in Eleanor's handwriting, passcode hidden in maiden name, plus year of marriage. Catherine already knew Eleanor's mother's maiden name. She knew the exact year. They were back in the truck by 8:23. Daniel avoided the main highway entirely. He took the quiet back route through East Montpelier, heading towards Stowe. 2-lane road, dense woods on both sides, 0 cell signal in the dips. They were 11 minutes outside of town when a black Suburban rushed up from behind. A second Suburban blocked both lanes ahead. Here is where we see who they truly are. We learn who people are under pressure. Daniel braked smoothly, parking the Ford on the shoulder. Stay in the truck, he ordered. Lock it the second I'm out. If this goes bad, slide over and drive. Do not wait for me. She stared. Daniel, lock it. He stepped out onto the empty road. 3 men climbed from the twin Suburbans, not a single uniform among them. One held a pistol low against his thigh. He hid it, acting exactly how people do when they think no one is watching. Catherine hit the lock. The next 22 seconds revealed everything. Daniel strolled toward the first guy, hands resting open and empty at his sides. A split second later, those empty hands snapped shut. In one fluid move, he stripped the gun away. The guy's wrist snapped backward with a sickening crack, loud enough to pierce the glass. The second attacker lunged forward, swinging a heavy baton. Daniel slipped under the strike, grabbing the elbow. Instantly, the attacker ate gravel, pinned face down with his arm twisted sharply up his back. The third guy watched this unfold and sprinted straight into the woods. Let's pause here. This was the most efficient, brutal violence she had ever witnessed. No ego, no rage, just pure cold function that tells you who he really is. Daniel returned to the Ford. His raw knuckles were bleeding from the dirt. His chest rose a bit faster, but that was it. We need to leave, he said. Another crew will be here in an hour. He hit the gas. Total silence for 10 straight minutes. Finally, he stopped at a lonely station near Stowe. He grabbed an old payphone receiver. Catherine honestly thought those relics were completely extinct by now. Major, he muttered. Need extraction logistics. Federal handoff in Boston 24 hours. Quiet filled the line. Yeah, the drive is hot. You pick the drop point. He slammed the phone down. Their hideout sat 3 miles from Stowe down a dirt path. A wooden cabin belonging to an old Marine buddy from 2 separate combat tours. His friend was gone. Daniel dug the key out from beneath a pot of dead dirt. Inside, a dim yellow bulb buzzed over an old propane camping stove. Beyond the glass, fresh snow started drifting over the dark, freezing water. He brewed some tea. Dropping into a chair, he finally spilled his secrets. Hopkins, Walter Reed, 2 deployments, the medal in 2018. Margaret's diagnosis in early 2022, pancreatic cancer, 11 brutal months left. He walked away to nurse her. When she passed in 2023, the surgeon couldn't hold a scalpel anymore. He surrendered his active badge, shifted to reserve status, and quietly fled Washington. Moved his little girl to Boston's South End, seeking a quiet life far away from screaming medevac helicopters. Catherine reached across the table, her palm gently covered his. He didn't pull back, but he didn't wrap his fingers around hers either. He just let the warmth linger outside. The winter storm raged on unseen. They hit the Boston city limits by 10 the following morning. The federal prosecutor ran things from a 23rd floor suite staring down at the harbor. The lead prosecutor was a sharp woman named Marisa Kang. Daniel trusted her from 2 combat tours back when she served as an Army Reserve lawyer. She accepted the flash drive, letting Catherine speak for 40 solid minutes. She heard Daniel out for 20 more, 5 sharp questions, 1 single phone call. By midday, 2 FBI agents were huddled next door, tearing into those encrypted files. "You and I know peace never lasts." Mid-statement, Daniel's phone suddenly buzzed on the wooden table. The screen flashed Margaret's mother. She lived exactly 4 blocks away in the South End. She'd been keeping Nora safe overnight. He answered the phone and listened. Catherine couldn't hear a single word being spoken. But she noticed his face change, his careful, quiet composure fractured for just 1 second. She'd never witnessed that facade slip. The crack in his armor was entirely silent. For 1 solitary moment, his gaze drifted to some distant, dark place before snapping back. Then the stoic mask returned. "How long ago?" he asked quietly. "What did the badges say?" "Were they in uniform?" He paused, listening closely. "Get inside your house," he ordered. "Lock everything. Do not open that door for anyone with a badge until I arrive." He disconnected and stood up. "2 Burlington cops visited my mother-in-law's place about an hour ago," he revealed, voice deadpan. "They served an emergency child welfare order. Something about the father lacking mental stability." Marisa Kang was on her feet before he even finished speaking. "Go," she urged. "I'll handle the phone calls from here." Daniel was already moving through the doorway. Catherine quickly snatched her coat. "Stay," he commanded without turning. "No," she replied flatly. He glanced back, offering zero argument. They drove north through the fading afternoon, deep into the night. New Hampshire faded by. Vermont emerged, freezing and pitch black, yet he refused to speed. He never slowed down either, holding exactly 3 miles over the limit the whole drive. You see, real discipline is silent. He wouldn't risk acting like a man in a hurry. He didn't speak a single syllable about his daughter. He really didn't need to. They finally arrived at the Burlington police station on Pine Street at 2 a.m. flat. A tired desk sergeant glanced up. Detective Holcomb emerged from a back hallway, crossing the quiet lobby with empty, open hands. "Mr. Reeve," Holcomb started cautiously. "We have your daughter in a protective interview." "There is a protocol." Daniel never even broke his stride. He pulled his wallet from the inner pocket of his worn, heavy flannel jacket. It wasn't standard leather, just a simple, unpretentious black trifold. He snapped it open with one hand, holding it right at the detective's chest level. The federal badges inside were quietly reactivated 18 hours prior via one discreet call to Newport's Navy Provost Office. "Lieutenant Commander Daniel Reeve, Naval Medical Corps Reserve," he stated. "I am here for my daughter." Holcomb studied the rigid credentials, then measured the quiet intensity of the father and stepped away. Daniel moved past in total silence, with Catherine trailing closely. They found Nora inside a cramped, carpeted back room, accompanied only by a quiet woman wearing a standard foster care ID badge. A spare stuffed rabbit sat discarded in the corner. Little Nora refused to touch it. Instead, she sat on a dull beige couch, arms wrapped tightly around her own knees. She glanced up as the heavy door creaked open, but she didn't run. She rose to her feet incredibly slowly, showing that immense quiet bravery of a child refusing to cry. Then she took 4 deliberate steps and pressed her small face directly against her father's chest. Daniel sank down, holding her in complete silence. His hands shielded her, one resting between her small shoulder blades, the other gently cupping the base of her sleep-tangled neck. The social worker respectfully stared at the floor and quietly exited. Let's follow them outside 10 minutes later, out into a completely deserted parking lot. Harsh sodium lights buzzed above as thin, sluggish snow drifted sideways on a biting winter breeze. Hidden in the dark, Daniel held his daughter tight. His proud shoulders shook just once, and never again. Catherine stayed 3 paces back, refusing to intrude. We see his true character in this unseen, shattered moment. In that quiet darkness, Nora lifted her face from her father's shoulder. She studied Catherine through the heavy shadows. A silent, unseen plea, Catherine stepped forward and gently took her hand. You and I know character speaks in silence. They just stood together under those harsh yellow lights. Their breath formed small white clouds, quietly fading into nothing. The bitter wind swept dry snow across the empty asphalt. 2 days later, the FBI publicly arrested Vincent Mallory at Burlington Airport. Fleeing when nobody was looking, he carried a fake passport and a one-way ticket to Bermuda. Cameras caught his very public walk through the terminal, handcuffed. The Charity Foundation convened an emergency board meeting by 10 that morning. Behind closed doors, a unanimous vote stripped his board seat before lunch. That same week, Marcus Pace quietly emerged from secure protective custody. Eleanor met him at the train station, bringing a winter coat that now hung loose on his frame. She draped it over him, holding tight. Unseen in the shadows, Catherine watched this private display of loyalty. When Eleanor finally noticed her, the older woman crossed the platform, offering Catherine a deeply sincere embrace. 22 years of shared history, working behind the scenes together. Yet this was the very first time they had ever truly embraced. After witnessing that private grace, Catherine saw the organization differently. Not just some legacy to protect, but a vital tool to help people. Alone at her kitchen table, she quietly rewrote their entire mission statement. She asked Daniel to consult on a trauma response program, local, part-time, entirely on his own terms. He did not give an immediate answer. He just sat gripping his coffee mug, his quiet devotion obvious as he watched Nora build a perfect tower of 3 books on the living room rug. Then he simply nodded, no loud declarations needed, just a silent, steadfast agreement. He never needed to. 6 months later, Burlington finally thawed into late May. The beautiful cherry trees lining Battery Park quietly burst into bloom. 2 weeks behind schedule, yet vibrant in that special way late bloomers are. Let's observe Daniel's porch on an unrecorded, quiet Saturday afternoon together. He had secretly rebuilt his neighbor's fence months ago, accepting only jars of local maple syrup as payment, which now proudly lined his kitchen shelf. Inside, Nora rested on the rug, a heavy hardcover book open across her stomach, Mr. Biscuit resting right by her ear. She was almost 10. She studied those pages with the exact unseen focus her mother once had. Out front, 2 simple wooden chairs faced the modest yard. Between them, a small table held coffee mugs and a stapled 22-page community grant proposal. This detailed document outlined 3 mobile trauma response units to deploy. They would serve Vermont's most isolated rural counties starting this October. The foundation covered 40%, while the state matched the remaining balance. Unseen by anyone, Daniel had meticulously mapped every route, writing the entire staffing model himself. Catherine quietly read the final page aloud. I'd like to name one of them for Margaret Reeve. Daniel stayed silent for a long moment, his gaze drifting out toward the water. Lake Champlain formed a pale horizon above the rooftops, where a solitary sailboat moved slowly. She would have liked that, he whispered. His steady voice didn't break, it just slowed. A worn wedding band still rested on his left hand, a quiet, enduring, unseen loyalty. You and I see his truth. Catherine knew he'd never remove it, and stopped questioning his devotion. His right hand rested on the armrest. Gently, without an audience, she placed hers over his. Watch closely. She didn't overthink placing it there, and he didn't pull away. Unseen by the world, their hands simply rested together without a single downward glance. The screen door swung open right behind them. Nora padded out in her socks, clutching a heavy hardback book tightly against her chest. The little girl observed them resting in the chairs, quietly stepped between them, and claimed her spot on the wooden porch step right at their feet. She gently rested her head against Catherine's knee. As Catherine stroked the child's hair, Nora slowly opened the heavy book. Inside was a tiny ink drawing, a simple paper boat drifting along one thin, fragile, wavy line. The familiar handwriting in those margins was her mother's. Nora started reading out loud. Her voice stayed soft. The evening lake wind quietly carried half those words away. Catherine missed a few sentences, but that didn't matter. Daniel just sat quietly listening. Hidden from view, his rough fingers shifted under Catherine's hand, gently held hers, then relaxed. The fading lake light slowly danced across the side of the house. Let's be real, he never returned that lost wallet for cash, nor did she follow this honest father for praise. They weren't putting on a show for anyone. That was the only reason they could truly trust that it was real.